A widow was left to die in the desert, until a warrior risked everything for her. The gunshot still echoed in Elena Vasquez's ears as she crawled through sand that burned like hellfire under the noon sun. Her fingers clawed at the earth, nails splitting against stone and thorn, while Miguel's blood dried black on her cotton dress. 3 hours since the shooting. 3 hours since she'd watched her husband fall with his morning coffee still steaming on their kitchen table. The desert stretched endless in every direction. No shade. No water. Just the vultures wheeling overhead like God's own judgment. Elena pressed her face against the sand and tasted copper. Her own blood this time, from where Garrett Sullivan had struck her with his rifle, but before dragging her to the wagon. Before dumping her here like garbage 20 miles from anywhere living souls might find her bones. She'd known Sullivan since he was a boy pulling girls' braids in Sunday school. Known his father, rest his soul. Known his mother, who'd brought cornbread when Elena took fever last winter. Good Christian folk, the Sullivans. Salt of the earth. Salt of the earth, and Miguel was dead because of it. The sun hammered down merciless. Elena's lips cracked. Her tongue felt thick as leather in her mouth. She closed her eyes and saw Miguel's face again, the way his dark eyes had widened when Sullivan kicked down their door at dawn. Not surprise. Recognition. Miguel had known this moment would come. Shoulda kept your mouth shut, Miguel, Sullivan had said, casual as discussing the weather. Some secrets ain't meant for telling. Miguel had reached for the shotgun above the mantel. Never made it halfway there before Sullivan's bullet took him in the chest. Elena rolled onto her back, staring at the endless blue sky. The vultures circled lower now. Patient. They knew. But Miguel had told her. In those last gasping moments while Sullivan ransacked their bedroom, Miguel had whispered the truth with his dying breath. Where the gold was hidden. How Sullivan and his partners had murdered the Mexican miners at Esperanza Creek. How they'd covered it up, blamed it on Apache raids. How Miguel had been there. Had seen everything. The mission, Miguel had gasped, his hand cold in hers. Tell Father Martinez. The mission. Elena dragged herself another yard through the sand. Her water bottle was gone. Her shoes were gone. Sullivan had taken everything except the dress on her back and the wedding ring on her finger. Even that he tried to pull off, but her knuckles were too swollen from where he'd stomped her hand. The ring caught sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across the sand. Such a little thing. Cost Miguel 2 weeks' wages from the mine. He'd been so proud, presenting it to her that Christmas morning 3 years ago. Elena's vision blurred. The heat, maybe. Or tears. Hard to tell which anymore. She thought of the federal marshal who'd been asking questions in town. Thought of Father Martinez waiting at the old mission, expecting Miguel for confession this Sunday. Thought of the wives in town who'd whisper about the poor widow who'd lost her mind with grief. Who'd shake their heads and cluck their tongues about how she'd accused good men like Garrett Sullivan of terrible things. Nobody would believe her. Not without proof. Not against Sullivan and his partners. But Miguel had hidden something. She was sure of it. Some evidence, some proof of what he'd seen at Esperanza Creek. Hidden it somewhere Sullivan couldn't find, couldn't destroy. The mission, Miguel had whispered. Elena closed her eyes. Felt the sun burning through her eyelids. Felt her heart beating slower, weaker. Felt the desert claiming her by degrees. But then she thought of Miguel's smile. The way he'd sung while working in their little garden. The way he'd held her when the nightmares came, whispering promises in Spanish that tomorrow would be better. Always better. Miguel deserved better than this silence. Those dead miners at Esperanza Creek deserved better. Elena opened her eyes. The vultures were closer now. She could see their red heads, their black eyes fixed on her with ancient patience. Not yet, she whispered to the desert. Not yet. She began to crawl again. 1 yard. Then another. The sun beat down like the wrath of God, but Elena Vasquez crawled through the sand and thorns, carrying the weight of truth and the terrible burden of being the only one left alive to tell it. Samuel Cross smelled death on the wind before he saw the woman. His horse, a paint mare named Sorrow, snorted and shied at the scent. Samuel pulled her up short, scanning the desert floor where buzzards hopped and squawked over something hidden behind a stand of prickly pear. His hand moved instinctive to the colt at his hip. 15 years of riding alone had taught him to trust the mare's nose. Death meant trouble, and trouble meant white men with questions he couldn't answer. Questions about the Apache blood running through his veins. Questions about the scars crossing his back like a roadmap of old pain. But the buzzards scattered wrong. Panicked. Like they'd been cheated of a meal. Samuel urged Sorrow forward, his jaw tight. Whatever lay behind those cacti was still breathing. The woman sprawled face down in the sand, her dark hair spread like a fan across her torn dress. Blood crusted her hands and knees. Her lips were split and swollen from thirst. But her chest rose and fell, shallow as whispers. Samuel dismounted slow, his boots crunching on gravel and thorns. He'd seen plenty of folks left for dead in the desert. Usually they stayed that way. This one had crawled maybe 3 miles from wherever they'd dumped her, judging by the trail of disturbed sand stretching back toward the eastern hills. 3 miles. Through this heat. With no water. Stubborn, he muttered, kneeling beside her. The woman stirred at his voice. Her eyes fluttered open, dark brown and fever-bright. She tried to speak but only managed to croak like dried leather. Samuel uncorked his water bottle and lifted her head gentle-like. Easy now. Just a sip. She drank greedy at first, then caught herself and pulled back. Smart. Folks who'd been without water long enough knew to go slow or risk losing it all again. More, she whispered in Spanish. Samuel studied her face. Mexican, probably. Pretty, under the sunburn and blood. Wedding ring still on her finger, though her hand was swollen purple where someone had tried to remove it. Someone who'd left her here to die. He should have mounted up and ridden on. Should have left her another swallow from his bottle and pointed her toward the nearest settlement. That was the smart play. The safe play. Samuel Cross had sworn off rescuing white folks' women 15 years ago, when the last one he'd helped had screamed rape soon as she reached town. Had watched from jail while they prepared the noose, saved only by an Apache raid that scattered the lynch mob long enough for him to break free. But this one looked at him without fear. Just gratitude, pure and simple, like he was salvation itself instead of a half-breed drifter with more enemies than friends. My husband, she managed, her voice stronger now. They killed Miguel. Left me to die. Who did? Sullivan. Garrett Sullivan and his men. Her eyes hardened. They murdered my husband for what he knew. Samuel knew the name. Everyone in 3 counties knew Garrett Sullivan, the sheriff's brother-in-law. Big man in the cattle business. Upstanding citizen who never missed church on Sunday. Also the kind of man who could leave a Mexican woman in the desert and sleep sound at night. What did your husband know that got him killed? Elena tried to sit up. Samuel caught her shoulders, feeling how thin she'd grown. How fragile. Gold, she whispered. Stolen gold. And murder. 20 men dead at Esperanza Creek, blamed on Apache raiders. Her eyes met his. But it wasn't Apache. It was Sullivan and his partners, killing for gold. Samuel's blood went cold. He knew Esperanza Creek. Had family there once, before the massacre. Had buried his uncle and 3 cousins in that cursed ground, cursing the Apache raiders who'd supposedly butchered them for sport. You got proof of this? Miguel hid something. Evidence. At the old mission, maybe 20 miles south. Elena gripped his wrist with surprising strength. Please. Help me reach Father Martinez. He'll know what to do. 20 miles. Through desert that could kill a strong man on a good day. Carrying a half-dead woman while Sullivan's men probably combed the territory looking to finish what they'd started. Samuel should have said no. Should have walked away clean. Instead, he found himself thinking of his uncle's face. His cousin's laughter, silenced forever. All these years he'd cursed the wrong killers. Sullivan's got men all over this county, Samuel said. They find us together, they'll hang me and finish you proper. Then we don't let them find us. Samuel looked into her eyes and saw something he recognized. The same hard flame that had kept him alive through prison beatings and desert crossings and a dozen other times when dying would have been easier. Some folks were born to quit. Others were born to crawl 20 miles through hell if that's what it took. Elena Vasquez was the crawling kind. My name's Samuel Cross, he said finally. Elena Vasquez. She tried to smile through cracked lips. Thank you, Samuel Cross. The hidden canyon lay like a secret carved into the earth, sheltered by walls of red stone that rose 100 feet toward the darkening sky. Samuel had found it years ago, fleeing a posse that wanted him for a murder he didn't commit. Now he carried Elena down the narrow trail, her fever burning against his chest like a live coal. She'd been delirious for hours, muttering in Spanish about blood and gold and men with kind faces who killed in shadows. Samuel had pushed sorrow hard to reach this place before full dark, knowing Elena wouldn't last another night in the open desert. A spring bubbled from the canyon wall, sweet and cold. Samuel laid Elena on his bedroll beside it, then stripped to the waist and began washing the sand and dried blood from her wounds. Her hands were torn to ribbons from crawling through thorns. Her face was burned raw by the sun. But it was the fever that worried him most. Miguel, she whispered, eyes closed. Don't let them take Miguel. Samuel dampened his spare shirt in the spring water and laid it across her forehead. Miguel's gone, Elena. You got to fight for yourself now. Her eyes opened, suddenly clear. You believe me? About what they did? I believe you saw something that got your husband killed. Esperanza Creek. 20 miners, mostly Mexican. Sullivan told everyone Apache raiders hit them. Elena's voice grew stronger as she spoke. But Miguel was there. Saw Sullivan and 4 other men ride in at dawn. Heard the gunshots. Saw them loading gold into wagons. Why didn't Miguel speak up before now? Elena's laugh held no humor. Speak up to who? Sullivan's brother-in-law is the sheriff. His cousin is the judge. His partner owns the newspaper. She sat up slowly, accepting the water Samuel offered. Miguel tried to forget what he saw. Tried to convince himself he was wrong. But then that federal marshal came to town last month, asking questions about the massacre. So Miguel decided to talk. Sullivan must have found out somehow. Must have been watching us. Elena's hand went to her wedding ring, twisting it absently. Miguel told me where he hid the proof. Said if anything happened, I should take it to Father Martinez at the mission. Above them, the canyon walls caught the last light of sunset, glowing like coals in a forge. Samuel built a small fire in a circle of stones, keeping it low and smokeless. They were hidden here, but sound carried in the desert night. A sound echoed from the canyon entrance. Distant but unmistakable, the scrape of shod hooves on stone. Samuel was on his feet instantly, his hand on his gun. Stay down, he whispered, kicking sand over the fire. The canyon went dark except for starlight. Samuel moved to the entrance, pressing himself against the stone wall. 3 horses, maybe 4. Moving careful-like, but not careful enough. Sullivan had found their trail. Samuel crept back to where Elena waited, her face pale in the darkness. "They're here," he whispered. "For riders, coming up the trail." Elena's hand found her husband's ring, gripping it like a talisman. "What do we do?" Samuel checked his colt, then looked toward the back of the canyon where another trail, barely wide enough for a horse, wound up toward the mesa. Dangerous in daylight. Deadly in darkness. But staying meant fighting 4 men in a box canyon with no escape. "We climb," Samuel said. The old mission of San Gabriel rose from the desert floor like a broken promise, its adobe walls crumbling under the weight of decades and neglect. Samuel and Elena reached it just as dawn painted the eastern sky the color of old blood, their horses lathered from the hard ride through darkness. They'd escaped Sullivan's men at the canyon, but barely. The treacherous climb up the back trail had nearly killed them both, Elena clinging to consciousness while Samuel led their mounts by moonlight across ledges that crumbled under their feet. Now they had maybe an hour before Sullivan's posse found their trail again. Father Martinez emerged from the mission's shadowed doorway, his brown robes dusty with age. He was older than Samuel remembered, his hair white as desert bone, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made him a friend to outcasts and wanderers. "Elena, child," the priest said, hurrying forward. "Miguel sent word you would come." Inside the mission, dust motes danced in shafts of morning light falling through broken windows. Father Martinez led them to a small room behind the sanctuary, where he knelt and pried up a loose stone from the floor. "Miguel brought this 3 days ago," the priest said, pulling out a leather pouch wrapped in oilcloth. Elena's hands shook as she unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a small book bound in cracked leather, its pages yellow with age. She opened it, revealing columns of figures written in Miguel's careful hand. "Account ledgers," she breathed. "Sullivan, Garrett, Kleiner, they've been stealing from the mines for 2 years." But at the bottom of the last page, pressed into the leather like a signature, was a small piece of metal. A button from Sullivan's vest, torn off in the struggle with one of the dying miners. "Miguel went back," Elena whispered. "After the killing, he went back and searched the bodies. Found this caught in Jose Morales' fingers." Outside, the sound of approaching horses echoed off the mission walls. Samuel moved to the window, counting riders in the morning haze. Sullivan had brought 6 men this time, all armed, all wearing the hard faces of men who'd killed before. "Cross." Sullivan's voice carried clear in the morning air. "We know you're in there. Send out the woman and maybe we let you ride away." Samuel positioned himself at the main doorway, Elena and Father Martinez behind the altar. "Why don't you come in and take her?" Sullivan appeared in the doorway, his gun drawn but not aimed. "Miguel made his choice," he said. "Chose to stick his nose where it didn't belong. Now you got the same choice to make." Elena stepped forward, the ledger still in her hands. "Some things are worth dying for," she said. Sullivan's face hardened. "So be it." The first shot shattered the morning silence, followed by the thunder of guns and the screams of men discovering that cornered wolves bite back harder than expected. When the smoke cleared and the sun climbed higher over the desert, the old mission held new ghosts. But the ledger survived. And with it, the truth that 20 good men hadn't died forgotten after all. Justice, Samuel learned that day, sometimes wore the face of a widow who refused to let her husband's sacrifice be buried in unmarked sand. Some wounds were worth opening, no matter the cost, when silence meant letting killers sleep sound while good men lay in unmarked graves.